this is, that negative thought you've been having, and I just can't let you try and change yourself without a fight. So, go ahead and just turn this show off, okay? And, yeah, everything's still fine.
This is Blindsight with your host, Bill Lundgren, an AINC original podcast.
You serious?
We're not holding back truth. We're here to help you heal and become the best you possible. Here's the chair. Here's the pillow. Here's Bill.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blindsight, the product of Audio Information Network of Colorado. I'm your host, Bill Lundgren, and today we're going to have our guest that I've really been looking forward to, Aaron Bekkela, he and I will be talking about addiction. I know that the idea of addiction during the holidays sounds like a down subject, but it's an important one, especially for the holidays. And for me, I have to let people know that come this summer, we'll celebrate my 50th anniversary as a professional in the addiction field. So this is like a really topic that's important to me. So, Aaron, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
I would like to start off by getting some information from you about how you got into the field.
Bill, that's a pretty loaded question. It would take quite a while, but my life's path has basically led me here. I wouldn't even know where to start on that one. I've worked in many different fields.
Sure.
I've been a police officer, did the typical college student thing, I think, and worked in bars and casinos, ended up in as a therapist, going to school and doing all that. While I was working as a therapist early on, I was working at a crisis center, and I could see that co-occurring disorders was just a huge deal. So I started taking the certified addictions courses and just kept going all the way through to the licensed addictions counselor. Really a lifetime of observation.
Yeah, we've all had our experiences that bring us to this point. And it's such an important subject, but one that people don't like to talk about.
No, I think you hit it on the head, especially with the holidays.
Yeah. Well, I know in my experience, a lot of people would come in January. What has been your experience in terms of addiction during the holidays?
Well, the holidays is certainly a spike. I mean, you could pull up any sort of statistics on it with sales and such, to confirm that. But, I tend to kind of try to go by what my eyes tell me and dare I say the common sense meter. But, there's certainly a spike. But I mean, it's really our culture, our society. We used to have to go to the liquor store to get something, but nowadays it wasn't enough that we had beer in the grocery stores, but now we just passed more laws to allow the sales of wine so I mean it's our society is not backing away from. I think you could make a stronger argument that it's very subtle, but it's not so subtly making a full-scale sprint to even more addiction.
Well, what are people coming in for treatment now? Is it still largely alcohol or mixed? Is it depression? If you describe where you work, might help people to understand, the different ways that people get recovery.
Yeah, sure. Through my career, it's kind of been the same, whether I was working at the crisis center or I've been the clinical director at a couple places over the years. I was the intensive care coordinator at a community mental health for a couple of years, and now just working, more traditional, I think what society would think, just outpatient. But it's really been consistent throughout all of that. co-occurring disorders are make up, gosh, you could find a statistics to support just about anything. I try to kind of stick with the, like the CDC or SAMHSA or some of those, but, roughly 50% of people that come in with some sort of mental health diagnosis would be diagnosed with some sort of substance use disorder. That I don't think has changed much. And if it has, much like suicide, it's only increased.
Mm-hmm. And how do you get people to make the transition from coming in for a mental disorder to really coming to realize that they have a substance abuse problem as well? What do parents have to pay attention to, or partners or friends of people who are in serious trouble with addiction?
Well, Bill, you're a therapist, aren't you? That's open-ended. You're giving me all kinds of leeway there. With kids and parents, changes in behavior, grades. I mean, a lot of the traditional, more noticeable things, of course. But what I would do is encourage them to do some research. There's a lot of information online that you can gather. If your kiddo never used Snapchat before, for example, and now all of a sudden won't stay off of it, that is one pipeline to making some of the not so healthy connections in this world, for sure. But as far as what I see coming in, I'm very definitely the Carl Rogers approach. I'll meet them where they're at. They're the expert in their life, and I will go at the pace that they want to go at. And as long as they're recognizing that the substance abuse is playing a role, then we'll gain a little traction quicker. If they're kind of stuck in that ambivalence or that pre-contemplation stage of change, well, then it's going to be a little slower. And I'll just try to hold up that metaphorical mirror so they can see the connections themselves. And then hopefully we can, I'll certainly beat them over the head with a feather to get there. But, you really got to meet the client where they're at and go from there.
Yeah, true. I think one of the things, particularly for people who have a disability, what I've always found is that people around them say, well, if I had that disability, blindness or whatever, I'd drink, use whatever substance to avoid thinking about it. And that doesn't help any of us very much.
No, it really doesn't. I, was just speaking with a client yesterday and there's just some regular and growing conflict in his relationships. And, by the end of the session, he could see that drinking, in his case, really, it was just hitting the pause button. It wasn't improving anything. It was just getting him to the next day, so to speak. But in most cases, while it made the appearance of things going away or getting better, the reality was, in this relationship, it was irritating for his significant other, and in essence, only making it worse the next day when they could talk about things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the problems I always had, and particularly when we're talking about someone who has a disability who also has a substance abuse problem, is the enabler. And I think we need to talk about that because, part of our audience are family members, and it's important for everyone to pay attention to enabling, to having people have them seize the codependency, the behavior that's encouraging.
Yeah. There's some of those classic, catchphrases, if you will. The enabling is one of them. I just kind of find the more broad umbrella of ambivalence. Their enabling is in there minimizing. Mm-hmm. You can, the two will swim together at a holiday party where, oh, it's just the holidays. It's not that big of a deal. It's not, well, if your
Right.
cousin or your uncle or whoever has a disorder, it is a big deal. And just because it's the holidays and just because everybody's having a glass of wine or something, that doesn't all of a sudden make it okay. And yeah, it is. Those lines get blurred real quick, especially in our culture. Again, we're not backing away from it. We're on a full sprint to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kind of denial that run through those around the person with an addiction problem.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the addict or the alcoholic, it's the denial in the whole system.
Yeah, absolutely.
That people have to understand.
Yeah, everybody plays a role in it, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and we have, in our society, we have such a loose parameters that we allow people to have bad behavior under the influence, and we let people get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Our culture, our society in general. I mean, I don't want to get on a podium about culture and society, but it plays such a big role. I mean, I already mentioned that how the beer in the grocery stores wasn't enough. Now we have to have alcohol. Now they want everybody to be able to deliver it. Now but I mean, it goes so much further than that. You get online and you pick a social media, and God forbid your finger hovers over the wrong thing, and the next thing you know is you're part of some algorithm, and now every other ad that's popping up on your device or your phone, your computer, or whatever, is some sort of advertisement. But I mean, it doesn't stop there. I mean, gambling's getting legalized everywhere. Marijuana is getting legalized everywhere. Pornography and these OnlyFans thing. I mean, it's just, I guess for me as a licensed addictions counselor, I just sit back and shake my head and wonder, gosh, when is there something that steps in that reflects what's actually healthy as opposed to just this ongoing addiction cycle?
Well, you remember during COVID, which we're still in, but there was the approval for people to deliver cocktails to people who couldn't go to the bars. And I have to say that gave me the willies to hear that. Simply, because I know social drinking, but I mean, to have your, drink delivered was just a little bit, making it just a little bit too easy.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you what's troubling to me about that goes beyond the addiction itself. Now start talking about suicide. The suicide rates from, I believe it was 2000 to like 2018, something like that. They increased like 30-40%. We actually had a decrease for a couple of years right before COVID set in. Once COVID set in, it bounced back and increased, I think, another 4%. And the early data this year, I mean, I know we're in December, but they're still gathering it. The early data this year is showing it up 8%. Well, if you factor in that roughly 60% of all suicides include some sort of substance abuse, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I got a great idea. Let's deliver it to them too. Again, we have a very distinct cultural problem.
Yeah. Is there any particular thing that you've experienced that kind of, well, I'll take an example for me. My last drink was New Year's Eve when I realized I had a blackout.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
And that did it for me. But what do you think will get people to come and begin to think, get past the denial of addiction? What do people have, people that you see these days, in the early days of my getting into the field, I got really severe. There was DTs and everything like that. People are coming in these days earlier, but what is it that family members and the individual need to take a look at when and realize that they need help?
Oh boy, Bill, that is that is the magic wand question, really. I mean, if it was super simple, or if you ever figure it out, write a book. You'll retire right away if you do that, because again, it's so multifaceted, and when you're trying to meet someone where they're at, I mean, if gosh, that is a tough question, because my mind just goes in so many different directions with it, because it's starting so much earlier now too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the kids are doing a lot more using of pills and alcohol than I think when I was young.
Well, and they've also got the vaping going on that we didn't have going on when you and I were younger. I mean, you could smoke cigarettes, or
that's right.
But these vape pens and all the stuff that they can buy. I mean, some of it's dare I say harmless, but some of it's not as harmful as others. And a couple of years ago, when I was working at a in-person private practice, it's very close to the area high school. In fact, across our parking lot, you could see the parking lot of the high school. So I worked with a bunch of kiddos from that school, and it was so bad at that point in time that they literally had to take the doors off the bathrooms, because these kids are in there, and are they vaping one of these, fruit cartridges or whatever, or is it marijuana, or is it? I mean, not to continue beating this drum, but watch me. We're on a full scale sprint towards addiction, not away from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you had a magic wand that says, "Look, I want to change the system," where do you think you would start?
I think one area that I've always struggled with myself is with the DUI laws. All these different states and counties come up with their different criteria, be it a 0.08 or a 0.1 or whatever their research shows, that at this point your decision making is impaired, your reaction to all of these different indicators say right here is where we've identified you're not able to make the best decision or have reaction time or whatever. But they also say that right at that point that we just clearly identified you can't do it, we need you to make the decision to not drink and drive. So I would start with that. Why would you set up a system that's geared to fail right from the get-go? Why not just make it against the law to drink and drive, period? If you drink at all, then you don't drive. Now you need an Uber. Now you need a DD. Now you need, now you're taking someone who you haven't already proven can't make good decisions and saying, here, completely sober, we need you to make the decision right now that you will not drink and drive. And as long as they'll do that, numbers would plummet, I think. But some of the wrong numbers for some people would plummet too. Insurance rates and all these. I mean, these DUIs are a cash cow for a lot of different entities, and I don't know that that's necessarily what our culture wants. But again, that's not going to be the popular opinion. There's going to be people that would try to tear that apart. But I just look at it as fundamentally, why not make that change? Why not just make it against the law to drink and drive at all? Period. End of story. So that would be symbolic of a change. I would think would be common sense. However, I'm not holding my breath.
You and me both. I remember I started a DUI program for a county years ago, and I, was getting pushback from the judges, and just by accident, a friend of mine was a maitre d' at a major restaurant, and he was just telling me about a judge that he'd have to pour into the guy's car, help him get in the car. And I thought, oh, that's why we were having trouble with enforcement of DUI in our county.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's also we tend to punish those who are lower economic level, or someone for whom there's an excuse, either they're wealthy or, as in the case of people with disabilities, oh, it's okay, yeah, we'll let them drink and drive and whatever. And I think you're right. It certainly would solve a lot of problems if we were very clear cut, but we're not.
No, it's tough, you know. I mean, I remember not too long ago. Well, I don't know, maybe I'm getting older now, but there was two very, very prominent NFL wide receivers at roughly the same time. One was in a nightclub and shot himself through the leg. Stupid for sure, but he only harmed himself, right? And well, I guess he obviously could have harmed someone else, but the way this played out, he shot himself through the leg and ended up going to jail. I think his sentence was for roughly 2 years or something. I can't remember for sure, right? But dumb, and I think the punishment was fitting in many ways. However, at that same period in time, another very prominent NFL receiver, while intoxicated, ran an individual over, not on the street, on the sidewalk, and didn't go to jail, not even for a day. He bought his way out of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, much like the story you just told, again, but that's our culture. Nobody wants to not drink. Nobody wants to not use until it's too late and they realize, wow, somebody's dead. Somebody's, you know, I mean, and so, yeah, that's why I say that magic wand question, man, if you can figure it out, I'm not really sure how better to get to that when you have a glaring example like that and yet nothing changes.
Well, that's part of the difficulty of the family, because there's such a shame around being an addict or being an alcoholic, and family members don't want to bring shame on the family, so they just kind of say, oh, well, he just drinks a little too much or whatever, and fail to recognize the pattern, that there's a constant pattern of this. It wasn't until after my grandmother died that my mother and I had long moved out of the house, so I didn't know what was going on down there. Her daughter, my mother, just said, well, you know, she described how much alcohol she was drinking in her later years. And nothing was done. Nothing was said to me about it. Nothing was said in the family, because it was our grandmother. We couldn't, you know, accuse her of being an alcoholic. And, you know, she died of liver failure.
Well, and that kind of goes back to that co-occurring disorders deal. You know, what about the question of why was she drinking? Is she sad? Is she nervous?
Yeah.
Is she, you know, I mean, do we have a major depressive disorder going on, and that's her, maladaptive as it may be, that's her coping behavior? Again, they swim together. You know, you get some major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, any of these different ones in our culture, that's kind of the go-to and has been for years. Thankfully, that's changing a bit now, but so often that's really where it comes into play.
And again, it's the stigma of mental health that's involved, where people are afraid to say, you know, you have a depressive disorder. I'm not using a diagnosis thing. You're very depressed, because they assume, well, because they drink, they're depressed. Well, they may be drinking because they're depressed. Right. It's sort of feeding off each other, and we've got to stop it in some way. We've got to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And, well, he's no fun unless he's drinking. Well, you know, maybe you give him a chance if you get him sober and out of the depression.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I guess the only good thing that's coming to it is you know, the medications are improving. It isn't just the good old days of Antabuse anymore. There's all kinds of different treatment options out there that help reduce cravings, that can, you know, I mean, gosh, everything from naltrexone to gosh, you name it, the Narcan spray. There's all kinds of stuff out there. But it's really come out of necessity, not I don't know that it's so much to help people. Again, it's a money-making entity, of course. Not that they're not entitled to earn a living based on what they've created, but kind of which one's coming first, the chicken or the egg there? Is this about money or is this about helping people? I'm happy that it helps people, of course, but we've created such a horrid problem that we're trying to come up with all these different ways, and there are some good ways too. You take the homeless population. There's some really, really cool things going on in a few different places. Canada's one in particular, where they're making these like they're essentially taking sheds and making little mini house communities for people. And that's really what helps it the most, is finding a community. There's apps that are out there now. I Am Sober. All these different resources now if people look for them. I met a guy, I'm guessing it's fairly popular with the kids when they hear it. His organization is called Sober AF. He does quite well with it, though. I mean, they'll rent out entire sections of pro stadiums and do tailgating that's all sober and stuff. I mean, I think we're gaining some ground and some traction in many ways, but I just can't help but to see it as a fish swimming upriver, because you make a gain here, you come up with a medication there or an app there, and the next thing you know, it's like, well, you're probably going to become part of some algorithm online for it to try and lure you back. It's sad, really.
Well, hello, everybody. Jonathan Price here. I am the podcast producer at Audio Information Network, and I want to thank you for listening to part 1 in our series of addiction and overcoming addiction with Aaron Bekkela. He's been a fantastic interview so far. If you like what you hear, I want to encourage you to go onto Spotify or Apple Podcasts and give us a review. Give us a 5-star rating if you can. It really helps us climb the charts and make sure that we are getting the information not only to you, but to your friends and family as well. Like I said, this is part 1 of part 2. Next week, Bill will be joined by Aaron again, and they'll be talking more about the facilities for addiction, friends and family, and how they can react to somebody in an addictive state, and some other questions around the behaviors and attitudes of an addictive personality. So please come back next week as we dive into part 2. Again, thank you so much. On behalf of Bill Lundgren and the Audio Information Network of Colorado, I'm Jonathan Price. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.